September 19th, 1961. In a time where the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union was in full swing, and the entire world was collectively clenching its butt cheeks together in anxious anticipation of being vaporized in a nuclear apocalypse at any given moment, a strange and curious story unfolded. A tale of two honeymooners who wanted nothing more than just to arrive home safely after a long journey through the northeast portion of the US and Canada. A journey that would be interrupted by an event so strange and shocking that even now, more than 60 years later, nobody knows for certain what to make of it. As shadowy memories were finally brought to light, the ensuing story was considered by some to be too fantastical to be true. But to others, the story represents the holy grail of alien contact. What happened to Betty and Barney Hill on that fateful night? Welcome back to episode 9 of Super Mystery Bros. I'm your host Nate, and back with me in the studio once again is a man who has suspiciously long arms and legs, but swears up and down that he's not an alien, Ivan. Ivan, how the hell are you, man? We've been back from Thailand for about a month now. How was it? What happened to you? Do you want to talk about it?
You mean why I was absent from the podcast? Or you mean about the Thailand?
About what happened to you in Thailand.
What happened to me in Thailand?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about it, or?
No.
Yeah.
What happened to me in Thailand, man?
The monkey. Didn't you get attacked by monkeys?
Oh, shit. Yeah. Man, the last day in Thailand, me and my friend, we went up the freaking Monkey Hill or something like that, or Monkey Hills on Phuket. And, somehow I thought, oh, it's just called Monkey Hills, but probably there are no monkeys there because
it's called Monkey Hill, but you didn't think there would be monkeys there?
Because I thought that I went there before and I saw no monkeys or something like that. But we ended up in a different place, and there were like hundreds of monkeys there, man. More monkeys than freaking humans,
Uh-huh.
And then we were walking back from that hill, and then we decided, we gotta just buy some water and shit, But then those monkeys, they surrounded us, and yeah, they started politely asking us to give them
you nicely,
very nicely, like, give us this water, and then at first I refused to give it to them, but then they started asking less polite, like
they're not asking you, they're telling you, right?
Yeah, they were more like telling me, give us the water, give us the water. So I threw it, not so polite. I think they kind of
took
got
offense
pissed.
to it.
Yeah, they got pissed because of that. And then they surrounded us, and yeah, and then they kind of let us go, And then I was walking down the hill. I realized that there was something on my shin, and it was like hurting a little bit. And then I looked at it, and there was a scratch from the goddamn monkey man.
The monkey man or the monkey man?
From a goddamn monkey man.
Okay, there's a comma there, right? It's not a monkey man. It's a monkey man.
Monkey man.
All right, good.
Yeah, and then
that could have been our next mystery, actually.
Yeah, yeah. and then I had to do the freaking vaccine and shit.
How many? Wait, the rabies vaccine, right?
Yeah. I had to do like 5 of them.
Total or
total?
So far?
Total.
Okay.
Total of 5.
So you're good now? Did you get your last one yet?
Yeah, I got my last one maybe like 4 days ago.
Oh, that's cool.
So now I'm
You're
safe.
you're
more or
rabies
less.
free. All right,
Yeah,
good.
yeah. It helped me a little bit, you know.
Cool, man. Well, what can people do to assist us in our cosmic voyage into the dark and alien world of the unknown, man?
You know, as always, leave us a rating and a review or whatnot. Tell everyone you know about our fabulous, wonderful
Or
podcast.
maybe just one person is fine too. It doesn't have to be everybody.
It's better.
Sorry,
to be,
I didn't mean
I
to.
mean, it's better to be everybody, right?
Okay, all right.
One person is okay too, but you know,
As many people as you feel comfortable with.
yeah, at least one.
And how can people get in touch with us?
We've got an email, supermysterybrospodcast at gmail.com. So write us and, you know.
Thank God, man. All right. Well, before we get into this one, I just wanted to say I'm really excited to do this one because I've been fascinated by this case since I was a kid. And this one could be a long one because I've got to do it proper justice. And it's arguably the most important case in history regarding alien abduction. So buckle up, folks. Grab yourself some snacks and some shit to drink. This is going to be a long one. In a time where the US and the USSR were locked in a heated battle to settle the score over which side was the best at launching shit into the Earth's atmosphere and beyond, and the Berlin Wall had just been erected in order to stop desperate hordes of East Germans from accidentally fleeing into the West and choking to death on the sweet air of freedom, people across both sides of the cold conflict began keeping a watchful eye on the skies above them, not just out of a childlike wonder in this brave new world of satellites and space exploration, but fear that the other side would gain a technological advantage and use it to annihilate them from above in a similar fashion to that one scene in Terminator 2. Did your family fear getting nuked by us?
I never asked them about it. I'm not sure. Maybe I should ask them, but I don't think so.
You don't think so? All right. Go ahead and you can continue.
Okay. Betty and Barney Hill, a newly married couple from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, appeared to be the ideal couple who were seemingly a match made in heaven. The two had started off as just friends. Both had been married and divorced previously. Betty had never intended to marry Barney, but as the two began to spend more time with each other, they eventually fell in love. Although the two married on May 12th of 1960, which was almost a year and a half prior to their honeymoon, the two were obstructed from spending time together due to Barney's working in Philadelphia. Eventually, in March of 1961, Barney was able to transfer his job to a closer location to Betty. The two had been separated for those 10 months, but they had held together through the difficult long-distance relationship.
The two were an interracial couple in a time where this was less common, and inarguably more difficult as the civil rights movement was just in its infancy. Betty, 42, was white, a graduate of the University of New Hampshire, and worked as a social worker and participated as a civil rights activist. Barney, 39, was African American, a World War II veteran, and worked as a city mail carrier at the post office, first in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, before transferring to work at the post office in Boston, Massachusetts, commuting to 120 miles each day from their home in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. During his time serving in the Army, an accident with a hand grenade caused him to lose his teeth, relegating him to wear dentures. More on this later. Both were very active in their church and in the civil rights movement.
Friday, September 15th, 1961, Barney decided to request a few days off from his new job as distribution clerk in order to surprise Betty with an impromptu weekend getaway to Niagara Falls and Montreal, Canada. His request was granted, and on Saturday morning, Betty prepared for the trip. They had decided that if they were frugal and did not eat at many restaurants or stay at any fancy hotels, they could afford to leave on Sunday morning, September 17th. For safety reasons, Barney placed a pistol under the floor mat of their trunk and brought their dog, Delcy, with them on the trip. On Tuesday, September 19th, Barney misunderstood some directions that were given to him in French, got lost, and decided to drive to the outskirts of Montreal to find a motel that would accept their dog, Delcy. Barney was unsuccessful, but while out driving around, a news bulletin came over the radio announcing that a tropical storm was making its way up the East Coast, with the winds reaching 130 miles per hour. Betty and Barney made the difficult decision to cut their trip short and head straight back to their home in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, before the storm hit.
That same night, as they were entering back into New Hampshire, they stopped at a diner in Colebrook to eat. Although it was getting late, they wanted to get home as fast as possible and decided to press on and keep driving. Barney figured that if they kept going, they would be home by about 3 a.m. As they left the diner, Barney hopped into the driver's side of their 1957 Chevy Bel Air, and Betty hopped into the front passenger seat. They took off and eventually headed southward on US Route 3 toward Lancaster, eventually ending up on Route 93 in Ashland.
A brilliant waxing moon was slowly drifting across a clear and cloudless sky that was dotted by an endless amount of stars. As they drove down Highway 3 shortly after 10 p.m., they spotted a star in the sky that appeared to be moving. Barney initially dismissed it as a commercial airliner flying towards Montreal. Betty initially thought it to be a falling star. However, she noticed that it was moving upward toward the moon and then stopped abruptly. Betty, at the same time, was intrigued by the object and urged Barney to pull over the car so they could get a better look at it, and also let their dog Delcy out to go poochie.
Betty urged Barney to take a look at the object through the binoculars. He too noticed the object's irregular flight characteristics and unusual lighting patterns. Moments later, as Barney began to watch the object, he noticed that it began to rapidly descend into their direction. The couple were awestruck by the object, its erratic flight pattern, and its unusual lighting. It was able to rapidly change direction, hover motionless in the sky, and ascend or descend effortlessly. Barney did not believe in flying saucers and urged Betty to get back into the car, and the two and their dog continued driving down Route 3. However, as they drove around a curve near Indian Head, just south of the valley through Franconia Notch, they entered into a wide, expansive area. It was there that they encountered the object, directly in their path, hovering silently approximately 80 to 100 feet above the car. Barney, who was horrified, slammed on the brakes and came to a screeching halt in the middle of the highway. He grabbed the binoculars and stepped out of the car for a closer look. However, before he could do so, the object floated from its position above the car and came to a stop, hovering over some trees in a nearby field. He grabbed the handgun from out of the trunk of the car and began walking towards the craft. So, what do you think about this artist's rendition that we're looking at here? If you've got no thoughts about it, it's fine. We can continue on.
Do you have any thoughts about it? What do you think?
It'd scare the shit out of me if I saw that following my car. That's all I'd have to say about that.
According to the accounts, the craft was approximately 60 to 80 feet in diameter. It had double row of rectangular-shaped windows around its rim. It had two fin-shaped protuberances sticking out of its sides, with red lights at the tips. As Barney put the binoculars up to his eyes for a closer look at the object, he was shocked and horrified by what he saw. As he spun the dial and the object came into focus, he saw that looked to be several humanoid figures standing in the windows and moving about, reminding him of German officers in World War II. The craft then began to tilt downward and descend towards him, and Barney immediately became overcome with terror. He tore the binoculars away from his face and sprinted back towards the car. Nearly hysteric, he told Betty that they needed to get out of there, or else they were going to be captured.
Barney got back in the car and floored it down the otherwise empty Route 3, but the object followed them directly overhead. The two heard buzzing noises which seemed to bounce off the trunk of the car and felt a strange vibration. Strangely, the two drove on without speaking to each other, and what happened next was vague at best. The two had fuzzy memories of encountering some sort of roadblock and a huge fiery orangish red orb that was on the ground behind it. They both had an overwhelming desire to get back towards civilization and encounter other humans. As they drove through Concord, got onto Route 4, and made the last leg of their journey east towards their home in Portsmouth, they noticed something extremely odd. The sun was beginning to come up. This made no sense. At this point in their journey, it should have been earlier than 3 a.m. Approximately 2 hours of their trip was unaccounted for. Upon entering their home, they turned the lights on, went toward their window, and looked up toward the sky. Barney said to Betty, quote, "This is the most amazing thing that has ever happened to me," end quote. Betty recalled wondering if they would come back. Despite their traumatic experience on the road that night, Betty was quoted as saying, quote, "We felt very calm, peaceful, relaxed. We sat at the kitchen table, looked at each other, shook our heads in puzzlement, and asked each other, 'Do you believe what happened?' We agreed that it was unbelievable, but it had really happened. We would return to the windows and look skyward," end quote.
After arriving home, Barney said that he felt clammy, and decided to take a shower. He also felt compelled to examine his genitals. What the hell, man?
It's real. I didn't make it up.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Hen felt like he had been contaminated by something. Afterward, he began to unpack their belongings from their car, but Betty called out to him and told him to leave it all on their porch. Barney agreed, and shortly afterward, they went to sleep. Upon waking up, Barney suggested that the two enter separate rooms and attempt to draw the object that they saw separately, in order to make sure that they both saw the same thing. The two compared their drawings and were flabbergasted by how similar they were. Barney urged Betty that they should not tell anybody about what they saw, as nobody would believe them, and it would make them seem like lunatics. Betty, however, disagreed. Betty telephoned her sister, Janet, who had seen an UFO in the mid-50s, to confide in about her experience. She had confided in Janet that she was losing her sense of peace and was starting to feel uneasy about the experience. After the conversation, Janet called her neighbor, whose husband was a physicist, seeking advice about what to tell Betty, who in turn advised that she should contact Peace Air Force Base and report the sighting. He, the physicist, also suggested to Betty that she should place a compass at several locations around the car as she circled around it, and report her findings back to Janet.
Betty wrote the following in her diary, quote, "I took the compass and went out to the car. Barney refused to go, saying that he was trying to forget about what happened. It was still raining, but I could still see my car clearly under the streetlight in front of my home. I walked around it, holding the compass and not knowing what I was looking for. When I came to the trunk area, I saw many highly polished spots, about the size of a $50 or silver dollar. The car was wet from the rain, but these spots were clearly showing. I wondered what they were. I placed the compass over them, and it began spinning and spinning. I thought it must be the way I was balancing the compass, so I placed it on the car and took my hand away. The compass was really spinning and continued to do this. As I was watching this, I was filled with an unexplained feeling of absolute terror. I was standing there in the rain, under the streetlight, and telling myself, quote, 'Don't scream, keep calm, and don't be afraid. Everything is all right,' end quote."
Barney, reluctant at first, along with his upstairs neighbor, all experimented with the compass and observed the strange markings on the trunk of their car. As Betty called her sister Janet again to report back what she had found, she agreed to call Peace Air Force Base to report her experience. Janet and the rest of her family came to visit Betty and Barney at their home, and the spots on the trunk and the compass reaction to them became a huge spectacle. Barney was an unusually humorous man who enjoyed making other people laugh, but was noted as being quiet and withdrawn on this day. The entire group of people all observed the compass spinning wildly while brought near the spots on the trunk.
Once inside the home, Betty passed around her watch, asking if anybody could fix it. Both her and Barney's watches had stopped ticking. They had assumed that they just needed to be wound back up, but both watches had apparently received irreparable damage on the night of September 19th going into the 20th. Barney's pant legs were full of stickers, which was easily explainable by the fact that he ran into a field to get a better view of the UFO. However, the tops of his dress shoes were badly scraped, which he could not come up with a reason as to why. The leather strap on his binoculars was also broken. Adding injury to insult, his upper back was also in pain. Betty, on the other hand, was wearing a brand new blue dress on the night in question, and it was torn. She too had no explanation for this. Their dog Delcy, shortly after the experience, developed an epidermal fungus infection and respiratory problems, which had to be treated by a veterinarian. At the time, they did not chalk this up to anything unusual or tie it to the event, but Betty realized that Delcy had not been bathed following exposure to the strange craft. Delcy had also begun to whimper, shake, and move her legs as if running in her sleep following the incident.
On September 21st, 1961, Betty called the 100th bomb wing at Peace Air Force Base in Newington, New Hampshire, to report the sighting of an UFO. Both she and Barney gave interviewing officer a general description of the craft that they saw, but Barney omitted the part about seeing humanoid figures in the windows that communicated to him, because he didn't want to seem like a, quote, crackpot, end quote. On the same day, Major Paul Henderson called the hills and questioned Betty further. Then Major Henderson asked to speak to Barney. He was hesitant, but once on the phone, relayed more information about the experience than Betty had. Because according to him, Major Henderson did not act surprised or disbelieving of his story. Major Henderson was very interested in the fin-shaped structures that extended of the sides of the craft. Seemingly, Major Henderson was taking their report very seriously. He had called the Hills the following day to inform them that he had been all night writing their report and needed just a few more details to complete it. To Betty, it seemed that the Air Force was not brushing this off as any laughing matter.
Just 2 days after the incident, Betty decided to visit her public library in order to seek out more information about the UFO phenomenon, and checked out a book written by former Marine Corps aviator Major Donald Kehoe entitled The Flying Saucer Conspiracy, which was her first introduction to information on flying saucers. In the back of the book was an address for NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon, which she then wrote and sent a letter to, explaining her ordeal. Within several days of their experience, Betty began to have horrific nightmares and flashbacks of disturbing memories of being abducted and taken aboard the craft. To Betty, the strangest aspect of these nightmares and flashbacks were that they included real memories of that night, such as driving down the highway, seeing the craft, and hearing the buzzing noises at the rear of the car. Betty, being a habitual writer and diary keeper, began writing these down on notepaper to relieve some of the pressure. Quote, "At first, I didn't tell anyone about them. They were so weird," end quote, Betty said. Betty tried to hide them and just forget about them.
By October 17th, 1961, NICAP, right?
NICAP.
NICAP?
Yeah, that's the abbreviation.
Or
NICAP is the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon.
Okay. By October 17th, 1961, NICAP had replied to Betty's letter, stating that they were impressed by her report and that they were making preparations to launch an investigation. And on October 21st, 1961, Walter Webb, who was an investigator for NICAP, visited the Hills home and interviewed both Betty and Barney individually over a 6-hour period. In November, she took another look at the notes she had jotted down. Although her notes were scattered and she had not dreamed they went in sequence, she eventually pieced them all together and developed a logical sequence of events. She did not record the exact dates of her dreams, but estimated that they began about 10 days after the event.
All right, man. So do you want to just try to sum up the main events of the story? So Betty and Barney Hill, they decided to go on to this vacation to Montreal because their honeymoon was delayed for about a year and a half. And then while in Montreal, a radio news bulletin came on over the airwaves telling them that there was a tropical storm heading up towards their house. So they're like, oh shit, we got to go back home before the storm hits. So they cut their trip short. And while they're on their way back home from Montreal is where they encounter some sort of weird light in the sky that, you know, the rest is history.
They were already back in New Hampshire, right? Then they hit.
Yeah, they were kind of like, I think they were more than halfway home from Montreal. So yeah, I think they were like in northern New Hampshire.
Mhm.
Portsmouth is kind of on the coast. It's like a coastal city, and they were kind of like in the north part of New Hampshire and kind of inland.
Got it.
Yeah. An employee of IBM, Robert Homan, wrote a letter to the Hills on November 3rd after hearing of the story. He requested an interview and stated that his interest was to verify the origin of the craft and to gain insight into the UFO phenomenon. Homan, along with his fellow IBM employee C.D. Jackson, visited the Hills on November 25th, 1961. Betty and Barney mistakenly believed that they were government scientists who were visiting them in an official capacity. According to Betty, the questions they asked stimulated their thinking. How many miles was it from Colebrook to Portsmouth? How long did the trip take? Why did we average 25 to 30 miles per hour on a clear night with no traffic on highways with fast speed limits? What happened between the two series of beeping sounds? Were any belongings missing? How did the dog Delcy react? Have any other strange events happened since that time? Did we have any nitrates in our car? To Betty and Barney, the question of the missing time was the most perplexing. They had noticed that the sun was coming up as they arrived home, which was much later than when they should have arrived, which should have been around 3 a.m. After the visit from Homan and Jackson, they realized how significant this was. They should have been home at least 2 hours earlier. So just to clarify, Betty and Barney, they both knew on the day in question that they arrived home way later than they expected to, but it wasn't until the visit by Homan and Jackson that they understood that there was some sort of significance to this quote-unquote missing time.
During one of their meetings with Hoffman and Jackson, it was suggested that Betty and Barney consider hypnosis as the tool to uncover more details and memories of their experience, and also to see if it could help them figure out what happened during the missing 2 hours of time. At the men's suggestion, they also began to head out on weekends, driving through the White Mountains in order to try and pinpoint the exact location of the quote-unquote roadblock. You know what's interesting, man, that I actually been to White Mountains.
Oh, you have?
I think I told you.
Well, I know you've been in this general area, but
yeah,
I didn't know.
The freaking White Mountains.
Holy shit,
man.
that's awesome.
Okay,
did you like it?
It was freaking awesome. We didn't make it to the mountain in Washington because it was like windy or something. I'm not sure. So we were not able to went up the mountain.
I've seen pictures of the area. It's really a beautiful area.
It's super cool, man.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. As the story goes, it was after coming home from one such excursion that Betty and Barney experienced an unsettling event. As they unlocked the door and walked into their home, they noticed a pile of dry leaves on the kitchen table. The doors and windows were all locked and the home seemed to be secure, with no signs of breaking. Astonishingly, as they began to pick up the leaves and throw them away, they found Betty's blue earrings that she was wearing on the night of the alleged abduction. She had forgotten that she had worn them on the night of September 19th and hadn't realized that they were missing. At the time, Betty and Barney only reported this incident to their closest friends and relatives, under strict confidence. Betty's niece Katie recalls the true distress over the incident during the visit to her childhood home, having felt violated and vulnerable. Vulnerable. It was only many years after that Betty reported this incident to any investigator. The couple began to have deep anxiety about driving in unpopulated areas at night, and Barney, on one morning while driving to work, encountered a roadblock which disturbed him so much that he turned around and went home.
Alright, so let's fast forward a little bit. As time went on, the changes in Barney's life began causing him anxiety and exhaustion. He was commuting to and from work for a total of 160 minutes every weekday. He was also sleeping during the day as his job necessitated it, and being separated from his sons and his church and civil rights activities, on top of the stress caused by the UFO encounter, began to take a toll on his health. His blood pressure was going through the roof, and he began to have headaches, insomnia, and even an ulcer. He began to go to therapy for his ongoing issues. In the fall of 1963, Barney experienced a breakthrough memory of the so-called roadblock on that night. Betty's niece Kathy, along with other members of the family, were talking with Barney and trying to help jog his memory by walking him through each step, moment by moment, when he suddenly cried out some of the missing details. He described the men in the roadblock as having signaled him to stop by swinging their arms in a pendulum-type motion. Then, the car's motor died, and the men began approaching his car, walking in a strange, non-human, side-to-side swaying gait. Upon his next psychotherapy session, he inquired about hypnosis and requested a referral to a therapist who was trained in it. His doctor sought out the best and most competent hypnotherapist that he could locate within commuting distance of Barney's home, Dr. Benjamin Simon.
On December 14, 1963, the Hills went to an initial consultation with Dr. Simon, who was skeptical of UFOs in general, but agreed to work with them, mainly in order to help resolve Barney's health issues. Betty was still having nightmares, and Barney's health was deteriorating. Dr. Simon let them know that hypnosis isn't a magical bullet or even necessarily a pathway to the truth, but just to the truth as the subject perceives it. It took 3 weeks period for Dr. Simon to train the Hills to enter a deep hypnotic trance. The following is an excerpt from the book Captured: The Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. Traumatic amnesia, also called dissociative amnesia, is the total or partial inability to recall an event associated with trauma or extreme stress. These memory gaps, spanning from a few minutes to a few days, usually occur during the horrors of war, natural disasters, or accidents. This amnesia for the event is usually psychologically induced to protect the victim from the memories that cannot be safely integrated. Most people who experience traumatic amnesia, such as Hills, are aware that they have a period of missing time. The amnesia acts as a circuit breaker to prevent them from feeling overwhelmed. The resulting memory loss may be confusing and distressing for the individual who experiences it, just as it was for the Hills. Hypnosis and drug-facilitated interviews are employed by a psychiatrist to reduce the anxiety associated with the period of amnesia and to guide the patient through the painful experience or conflict. The doctor must use the extreme caution to prevent the creation of false memories through suggestion or to stimulate extreme anxiety that could lead to increased level of trauma. This was of utmost importance to Dr. Simon in his treatment of patients with traumatic amnesia. Recent research was suggested that although the content of the recovered memories may or not be accurate, it most frequently is. However, we cannot assume that it reflects real events unless another person independently confirms it.
On February 22nd, 1964, Dr. Simon began his hypnosis sessions with Betty and Barney. He was careful to conduct each session separately in soundproof rooms to ensure that the information could not be shared between the two, and that each of their stories would not be influenced by the others. So let's roll clip 1, which is just a couple minutes, a small sample taken from each of their hypnosis sessions.
I try to maintain control so Betty cannot tell I am scared. God, I'm scared.
It's all right. You can go right on, experience it. It will not hurt you now.
I got to get my gun. Oh! I gotta get my gun!
All right. All right, that's all.
I gotta get my gun!
Go to sleep, Steve. You forget now.
Oh,
You
Lord.
forget it now. You've forgotten.
I walk out and I walk across the road. There it is up there. Oh, God damn it!
Calm down.
It's
All right.
pounding in my head.
All right.
Pull the binoculars away. God, give me strength.
All right.
Pull them down. Run! Pull these binoculars down and run. God, if there's my God, give me strength. I gotta get away. Oh, Betty!
right, all
You
right.
gotta get away, Betty!
All right. Calm down. Calm down.
I'm driving. I
Calm
gotta
down.
get away.
We're driving along. I don't know where we are. I don't even know how we got here. Barney and I, we've been driving, and I don't know how long, and we haven't even been talking. I just been sitting here feeling that something's going to happen. And I'm not really too afraid. Except right now I am. At that time I didn't feel afraid.
Why are you crying if you're not afraid?
I'm afraid now, but I was.
Oh,
I
I
don't.
see.
I wasn't afraid. I was afraid when I saw the men in the road.
Men in the road.
I never been so afraid in my life.
And we're back. Dr. Simon hypothesized that Barney had absorbed details from their nightmares that Betty had talked about and used those details to fill in the gaps in his own memory, and continuously tested this hypothesis during their sessions together. However, throughout all of the hypnosis sessions, they both insisted that they were reliving an actual experience. In Betty's nightmares, she was stopped and surrounded by space people that had human characteristics. They were approximately 5 feet to 5 feet 4 inches tall, with large chests, quote-unquote Jimmy Durant noses, and large dark eyes and dark hair. Only one of the beings spoke, which was in English, but with a heavy foreign accent. Their skin was grayish in hue, and their lips had a bluish tint. They were all dressed in a navy blue or gray pants with short jackets and wore low boots and military-style caps. So it's important to note here that this is the physical description based on her nightmares and not the description that she gave during the hypnotic regression with Dr. Simon. So as for the post-hypnotic description of the beings, we're going to get to that shortly.
The beings took the couple to a clearing in the woods and onto a landed disc-shaped craft, where they were subjected to invasive physical examinations. Betty was quoted in her last hypnosis session as stating, quote, "I went up the ramp and I went inside, and there was a corridor, and there was a door, and there was a light inside, and there was a room, and there was a light inside this room. It was a bluish light, and I wanted them to take Barney and me into the same room. Then I got up to the door. Barney was behind me, and I started to go into the room. And I just started to... And they take Barney past the door. There were 2 men. The first 2. And then there were 2 men in front of me, and 2 on each side of the door. The man who was beside me showed me the door, and I went through. And he came in behind me. And the other man stayed with Barney." End quote. Betty later described the air inside the craft as being slightly cooler than the air outside, but not uncomfortably so. The lighting inside the examination room she described as being a brilliant, bluish white light. that seemed to shine from the walls and ceiling. It hurt her eyes at first, which caused her to keep them closed for a while.
According to Betty, she was laid out on what she described as a light-colored, metallic examination table. The beings took nail clippings, skin scrapings, earwax, and hair samples from her, and she was given what she believed to be a neurological examination. As the examiner tried to remove her dress, he was confused as to how to go about removing it. Betty sat up, and as the examiner saw the zipper, began tugging at it, which tore the dress in a small area. Betty had to reach back and unzip it herself. Apparently, the being had never seen a zipper before. Once her dress was off, the being began to feel up and down her spine. Later, a 4 to 6 inch needle was inserted into her navel, which caused her excruciating pain. When the being she referred to as the leader noticed that she was in pain, he waved his hand in front of her eyes and the pain immediately subsided. Afterward, she began to engage in conversation with the leader, who smiled and apologized to Betty for having frightened her. Some other beings came into the room, using words and sounds that she could not recognize, and the leader left the room with the other crew members. Betty, at this time, was concerned that something must have gone wrong with Barney's examination. However, the leader came back in moments later and began checking her teeth, and she realized that they must have noticed that Barney was wearing dentures. She was quoted as saying, quote, "All of a sudden there was a noise out in the hall, and some of the other men came in, and with them is the examiner, and they're all quite excited. So I asked the leader, 'What's the matter? Has something happened to Barney? What is it?' 'It's something to do with Barney.' And the examiner has me open my mouth, and he starts checking my teeth, and they're tugging at them. And I ask, 'What are they trying to do?' And the examiner said that they couldn't figure it out. Barney's teeth came out and mine didn't." End quote. In a session with Dr. Simon in April of 1964, she said, quote, "While I was waiting, I was talking to the leader, and when I was talking with him, one of the men came in with Barney's dentures in his hand. This is very funny because Barney is sensitive about this. Most people don't know he wears dentures, and he doesn't like to have people know this. I thought, well, he's going to be angry about this." End quote.
Apparently, the beings were ignorant to the human aging process. After explaining to them the human aging process and dentistry, the leader asked Betty what old age was, and had no concept of what time or aging was. She tried her best to make him understand, but he couldn't. Later on, she searched for a souvenir to bring back with her in order to prove that her experience was real. She found a book with strange symbols written in it, in a long, narrow columns. The leader agreed to give Betty the book, but the remaining crew members ended up taking it away from her, which angered her. The leader apologized to Betty, but stated that he had been overruled, and that the rest of the crew decided not to allow the couple to remember the experience at all. According to Betty, she said to the leader, quote, "You can take the book, but you can never make me forget about it, because I'll remember it if it's the last thing I ever do." End quote. The leader then laughed and replied, quote, "Maybe you will remember. I don't know. I hope you don't, but maybe you will. But it won't do you any good if you do, because Barney won't. Barney won't remember a single thing. And not only that, if he should remember anything at all, he's going to remember it differently from you. And all you're going to do is get each other so confused, you won't know what's going on. It would be better off if you forget it anyway." End quote.
When Betty asked the leader where they were from, the leader asked Betty if she knew anything about the universe. Betty replied, quote, "No, but I would like to learn." End quote. In response, the leader pulled down a star map from the wall of the ship, which contained numerous points of light which were connected together by curved lines. Some of the lines were thicker than others, and some were broken. When Betty asked the leader why some lines were solid and why some were dotted, the leader informed her that the dotted lines were expeditions. Betty asked the leader where he was from, and in response he asked her, quote, "Where are you on this map?" End quote. When Betty said that she didn't know, he replied, quote, "If you don't know where you are, there wouldn't be any point in me telling you where I am." End quote. He then retracted the map back into its place and closed it. Betty's description of the map is strange. She says that it was, quote, almost like looking out a window about 3 feet wide and 2 feet high. The pattern was in the forefront. Other stars were there, but not so noticeable. The stars which I had an interest were those that were connected by lines, although 3 others were noticeable to me, maybe from the angle from which I was looking, end quote. In Betty's dream, after Barney's examination was completed, they were escorted by all of the strange beings back to their vehicle, where they subsequently watched as the ship became a bright glowing ball that took off into the sky.
Barney's account, as told from his perspective, was nearly the same as Betty's. According to him, 6 men divided into 2 groups of 3 and approached both sides of the car. Although he was frightened, he didn't reach for the gun because he had the impression that he would be harmed had he tried to. He felt 2 eyes coming close to his and felt powerless to resist. His mind went blank and he closed his eyes. 2 men carried him along, with his feet dragging on the ground. Once on board of the craft, his description of the interior was consistent with that of Betty. He noted that there was a bright bluish light that seemed to emanate from the walls, and that the room he was led into resembled a hospital operating room. However, he told Dr. Simon that this didn't resemble the type of operating room that he had an appendectomy as a child. Quote, I was carried into a room and I got on a table and I was afraid, but somehow not afraid enough to run. I thought it would soon be over if they don't harm me, end quote. He later added, quote, it looked like an operating table or an examining table. I don't know. I just know that I could be supported fully on it, and it was very clean. Nothing elaborate. Just that I could be on it, and my feet extended out from the bottom of it. Overlapped it from the position I was laying in, end quote.
He went on to describe his examination in great detail. Quote, I felt my shoes being removed and my pants being opened, and I could hear a humming-like sound that they seemed to be making. They pulled my pants all the way down to where my legs were. I could feel them turning me over and putting something in my rectum. It was like a tube. It was not painful. I thought it was just a little larger than a pencil. I felt it go in very easily and then it was withdrawn. They took a look at my back and I could feel them touching my skin right down my back as if they were counting my spinal column. I felt something touch right at the base of my spine, like a finger pushing, a single finger. I could only hear this mum, 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 like sound, and then I was turned over again. And my mouth was open, and I could feel 2 fingers pulling it back. And then I heard as if some more men came in, and I could hear them rustling around on the left side of the table I was laying on, and something scratched very lightly like a stick on my arm. And these men left, and I was left with what I thought were 3 men, the 2 that had brought me in and the other one that seemed to follow these 2 men. I could tell that there was more than one person in the room, but only one man seemed to be moving around my body all the time, end quote.
Barney went on to recall that the examiner went on to check his ears and seemed particularly curious about his bone structure. The beings communicated not with him, but to each other, using strange sounds that he had never heard from either humans or animals. During one of his sessions with Dr. Simon, Barney stated, quote, I have the most peculiar feeling that something was placed against my genital parts. It was more as if it was in a solution of something that was there, that had substance to it, that had body to it, end quote. He said that he felt pressure or something, but there was not an erection or ejaculation, nor did he receive any pleasure from it. Barney suspected that they took a sperm sample from him, along with specimen from every orifice in his body. Sometime after the experience, Barney developed wart-like growths in the exact location where the cup-like appliance had been placed, although his physician initially diagnosed him with venereal warts. The specialist who removed them said that they weren't. They didn't have the cauliflower-like appearance of warts. Warts, right?
Warts, yeah.
And were not warts at all. A clear diagnosis was never provided.
David Baker, who was a well-known watercolor artist, was the first artist to help draw a forensic picture of the being's physical characteristics. First, he met with Barney and sketched 10 different pictures of the leader, examiner, and other crew members, to which Barney reacted with visible emotion as he saw the completed sketches. Later on the same night, Baker met with Betty and sketched more pictures of the beings based on her descriptions. Upon completion of the sketches, Baker commented, quote, "She went walking down to the other end of the room and just walked in tight circles and stayed by the window, very much upset," end quote. The following information on the being's physical descriptions were provided by Hills, post-hypnosis. 1. The captors' enlarged eyes were slanted and extended around the sides of their faces, indicating peripheral vision reminding one of cat's eyes rather than oriental eyes. 2. They appeared to have a wide-cheeked, weak-chinned appearance suggestive of a mongoloid face. 3. They had an enlarged cranial structure. Hypothetically, this would be anatomically necessary to compensate for the loss of space that a normal-sized brain would require to accommodate such enlarged eyeballs. 4. They gave the impression of immobility of oral muscle control. Barney realized that although from a distance he consciously recalled a smile by the humanoid who reminded him of a quote-unquote red-headed Irishman, his captors, upon closer inspection, did not seem to register the human emotions of sadness or joy. 5. A membrane was observed near the captor's mouth opening when it was parted slightly. This membrane appeared to flutter when the humanoid creatures communicated with each other in a humming type of language not understood by the Hills. 6. Although the iris seemed to fill up most of the creature's eyes, the small white area observed had a yellowish cast. The blinking of eyes was not apparent, suggesting the possibility that a membrane served to keep air and impurities out of the eyes, making lubrication of the orbs unnecessary. 7. No ear cartilage was noted, only ear holes, possibly covered by a membrane. 8. No hair was observed. 9. Skin color was aluminum gray. 10. Legs were spindly and chests were enlarged. Alright, man, so what do you make of this photograph, this watercolor painting that we're looking at? How would you describe this? Well, we've got two pictures in front of us. One is the watercolor, and then one is a model cast of the bust of the leader, according to Betty.
What's up with the guy on the left in the watercolor picture?
I think that's one of the other crew members, and then the one in the middle that we're looking at now is the quote-unquote leader. I mean, he's got kind of an oval head, kind of like almond-shaped eyes that wrap around the side of his head. He's got two nostrils and like a slit for a mouth. Really creepy looking. And then it looks like some guy in the background is just like, he has like a hat. Yeah,
the head is kind of
fucking weird.
Weird head, I'm telling you.
He looks like a mechanic.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And then the bust, there's the picture of the bust of the leader based on Betty's description. And kind of creepy looking. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah. Betty also revealed that she saw 11 or 10 beings, one of which looked considerably different from the rest. It was about 3.5 feet tall, had a head that was shaped like a basketball with large cranium, with the flat, large, wide-eyed face, with dark eyes that seemed to have little to no white or pupils. It had a thin slit for a mouth, a strutty build, a strange short fingers that had no apparent fingernails. She sensed hostility from the creature as it glared at her the entire time. His authoritative behavior caused her to rethink the hierarchy of the crew. Speculated that perhaps who she thought was the leader was some sort of interpreter, and this strange-looking smaller creature may have been the real leader. The examiner who did the most of the testing on the Hills was described as a 4.5 feet tall, with a head shaped more like a human, smaller in size in proportion to its body than the strange being just described. Facial features were similar, but the skin had a more bumpy appearance. Betty had a hard time describing it, only stating that the skin wasn't smooth.
The entity that they referred to as the leader was described as good looking, at least by alien standards. His appearance was closer to that of a human. His face was described as triangle shaped, with a very small chin and jawbone, a small mouth, and a small nose. He was approximately the same height as Betty, which was 5 feet tall. The rest of the crew members were described as being similar to the leader and the examiner, but neither of the Hills got a closer look at them, as they remained in an unlit corridor for most of their time on the ship. As far as Betty could tell, all of them had no hair, no eyebrows, or eyelashes. No ears were visible on any of the beings. Their skin had a grayish color. The hands had 4 fingers and a thumb, much like humans, but were long and slender. None had fingernails from what Betty could tell. Their chest areas were larger than the rest of their body, and they were barrel-shaped, whereas the legs and hips were smaller. When Barney was lying on the examination table, looking up, he got a look inside of the examiner's mouth, which had no teeth, but possibly a small tongue. So I know we spent a lot of time on the aliens' physical descriptions. I wanted to provide as much detail as I possibly could because I know there's going to be a lot of people out there who are very interested in that aspect of the case. So I'll hand it over to you, man.
The two were escorted back to their cars separately. Barney was the first to arrive, having been escorted back by some of the crew members. After a hypnotic recall, he remembers getting into the driver's seat and sitting on his gun. He remembers reaching under the seat and touching their dog, Delcy, who is curled up in a tight ball. As he sat back, he sees Betty walking towards the car. Barney told Dr. Simon, quote, "It was a bright, huge ball. Orange. It was a beautiful, bright ball. And it was going and it was gone and we were in darkness." End quote. The rest of the story comes full circle. They remember driving home with only vague memories of the event of that night and being surprised that the sun was coming up as they arrived home.
Alright, so let's talk about Betty's star map because this is perhaps the most compelling aspect of the entire case. So Betty recalled and drew a sketch of it while under hypnosis. Betty had described the map that she saw as approximately 3 feet high by 2 feet wide with a 3-dimensional appearance similar to a reflective hologram. The stars in the map actually glowed in a highly realistic manner. Marjorie Fish, who was a 3rd grade school teacher from Ohio and a member of Mensa, attempted to find out which stars were the ones that Betty saw in the star map. Since there wasn't a high concentration of stars in the map that Betty drew, Marjorie Fish figured that the star map must have been limited to only stars local to our sun, or at least select stars only. Fish had no access to a computer, as this was in the late 1960s, so she went about constructing a model of all the stars within 55 light-years of Earth. She did this by copying down all of their coordinates from the Ohio State University Library. She found that there were about 1,000 stars within 55 light-years of our sun in any given direction. Afterward, she began constructing a scaled 3D model of our galactic neighborhood based on the coordinates of all the stars within 55 light-years of our sun. The model was highly detailed. She used different colored beads hanging from threads to denote what kind of star it was. She found that there were many small red dwarf stars in our galactic neighborhood, which seemed unlikely to have any inhabited solar systems. She ruled these ones out due to their energy levels being too low, like Jeb Bush. Furthermore, she knew that certain stars had energy output levels that were not stable, so she ruled these ones out as well, as scientists figured that the development of life would require long-term temperature stability. Betty's map contained about 16 stars, all connected by lines which she was told were either heavy trade routes, light trade routes, or expeditions. Initially, Fish believed that she would be able to find many different patterns that would match what Betty had drawn, depending on where she stood and what angle she looked at the model from. Fish had tried to narrow it down further by eliminating stars that she felt probably wouldn't host extraterrestrial life. However, she was unsuccessful in finding a match. But in 1972, as new astronomical data was published, she built another model based on this new information and found one and only one pattern that matched Betty's star map, angle for angle and line length for line length. Dr. George Mitchell, who worked in the astronomy department of Ohio State University, checked Fish's work for accuracy and found no problems with it, and said that it was very accurate. Fish concluded that based on Betty's star map, the aliens' homeworlds were located on Zeta 1 Reticuli and Zeta 2 Reticuli, which is a binary star system. For those of you who don't know what it means, it's when two stars are orbiting each other. And this particular star system is only visible in the sky of the southern hemisphere of the Earth. The two stars are approximately 39.2 light years away from our sun, which is only about an eighth of a light year away from each other. So, what do you make of this star map? These sketches of the star map that Betty drew.
They look alright. Some interesting things to note about this finding. 1. All of the stars which were connected by lines on Betty's map are, for lack of better words, the right kind of star to potentially support life, even though only about 5% of the stars in the model would fit this bill. 2. All of the sun-like stars, sun-like meaning similar to our sun, are part of this pattern on Fish's model. 3. Zeta 1 Reticuli and Zeta 2 Reticuli were the stars on the map that had the heaviest trade route lines drawn between them. Trade route? 4. Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli are far enough apart to have a stable planetary orbit around them, so each of these stars would be able to have its own system of planets without the gravity of other knocking them out of orbit.
So think of a planet around one of these stars being like Tatooine from Star Wars, having two suns, except one would be smaller than the other and visible even during the daytime. It's approximately 20 times brighter than the planet Venus.
5. These two stars are a billion years older than our sun, and therefore any advanced civilization that would hypothetically originate in this star system could have a billion years head start compared to us. Billion with a B? It's like to say like...
Yeah,
for real,
not a million, a billion with a B.
Billion with a B. It's like it's a real billion, not like one of those small
not a
billions.
fake billion, man.
Yeah, not like one
It's
of those...
It's a big billion.
Big billion with a B, okay. 6. It's important to note that Betty could not have had access to any of the data needed to draw an accurate star map of this region of space, because at the time of her experience, the data did not yet exist.
So for further information about the star map, let's roll clip 2. So in this clip, the first several minutes will be from an old television program featuring Stanton Friedman, who's a nuclear physicist turned ufologist, Marjorie Fish, who constructed the star map itself, or, the physical rendering of Betty's star map and found the match, and then an Ohio State astronomy professor. And this is going to be a clip describing their arguments as to why they believe the star map is genuine. So let's roll clip 2.
Because of the peculiar spacing of the stars near the sun, it was impossible for Marjorie Fish to find a match of more than 4 or 5 of the 12 patterned stars in the star map. Then she began to focus on the stars that were most like the sun and most likely to have planets and life.
Finally, only the very best stars for life were left. When that happened, I had a 9-point match. A very exciting thing for me.
The 15-point match achieved by Marjorie Fish of the Betty Hill star map is unique and goes far beyond the laws of chance.
Despite the fact that Marjorie Fish tried thousands of different combinations of stars to try to match Betty's pattern, she was able to find one and only one pattern that matched angle for angle, line length for line length, what Betty had drawn. The star pattern makes sense from nearest star to nearest star to nearest star. The sun is part of the pattern. Quite remarkably, every one of the stars in the pattern is the right kind for planets and life. And all of the right kind of stars for planets and life in this volume of space are part of the pattern. The chance of that happening by accident, all the right kind and only the right kind for patterned stars, is 1 in several thousand. Perhaps most remarkably, this work tells us where one set of visitors originates. The base stars Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli are a very special pair of stars.
Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli are the closest to each other pair of stars suitable for planets and life in our entire neighborhood. Instead of being isolated from their neighbors as we are, Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 are 100 times closer to each other than we are to our nearest neighbor. It would not be surprising if space travel developed earlier between such close neighbors. Zeta 1 and 2 Reticuli are over 1 billion years older than Earth, clearly giving any beings living there a long evolutionary head start on us. We went to Ohio State University to get an expert opinion about the validity of Marjorie Fish's star map work. Professor Walter Mitchell has been a professional astronomer for over 20 years.
It took me quite a long time to gain a full appreciation for the work of Marjorie Fish, but it's become apparent over the years that, first of all, the work is, without question, accurate.
The proven validity of her star map enormously increases the credibility of the remainder of Mrs. Hill's story.
I first met Betty and Barney Hill in November 1968. I've spent a great deal of time since then investigating their abduction. I've talked to Dr. Benjamin Simon about his hypnosis sessions. I've listened to the tapes of those sessions, and I've looked at Marjorie Fish's star map work in great depth. It seems clear to me that Betty and Barney Hill were taken on board a flying saucer in New Hampshire in 1961. This story must be taken at face value. It's true.
All right, so now I want to provide a counter argument to the star map, and this is from famous astronomer Carl Sagan. And so clip 3, which I'm about to roll, is his argument as to why the star map is bullshit. So let's roll clip 3.
What makes it so special?
While on board, Betty had noticed a book written in an unknown hieroglyphic writing. She was also shown a strange window through which she could see a glowing pattern of dots connected with lines. It was, they told her, a star map displaying the routes of interstellar commerce. Afterwards, the Hills were released and permitted to return home, or at least this is their story. Now, believers find this account compelling, or at least plausible, chiefly because of the alleged star map. Here's what Betty Hill said it looked like. Now, why would anybody take this seriously? Because here is a real map, widely publicized by UFO enthusiasts, of 15 selected nearby stars, including the sun, as seen from one particular vantage point in space. This map includes stars that were first cataloged several years after Betty Hill recalled what she says she saw in the alien ship. Her map required, we are told, information that was not then available on the Earth. There is a resemblance between the two maps, but that's mainly because the lines corresponding to navigation routes have been copied from the Hill map onto the real star map. If we were to substitute some other set of lines for the Hill lines, we find that the eye suddenly is biased against seeing any agreement between the two maps at all. To make an objective test, however, let's remove the lines altogether. And then there's very little resemblance left. But these particular stars are selected from a large catalog of star positions. Our vantage point in space is also selected to make the best possible fit with the Hill map. If you can pick and choose from a large number of stars, viewed from any vantage point in space you want, you can always find something resembling the pattern you're looking for. I'm surprised that nobody could find a better fit to the Hill map. The star map argument is worthless, and yet this is one of the best attested cases of UFO close encounters.
Finally, to conclude our story, we've got to talk about Betty's dress, the one she wore on the night of the alleged abduction. According to her story, after the incident, Betty had folded up the dress and put it in the back of her closet, forgot about it, where it then remained until the spring of 1964. It was at this time that Betty noticed a pink powdery substance on it, which ruined the dress. Betty had initially placed it in the trash, but quickly changed her mind, retrieved it, and hung it up on a clothesline. On the clothesline, the pink substance blew away in the wind, but the dress was still badly stained.
In 1977, Betty met a man by the name of Leonard Stringfield, director of public relations at Dubois Chemicals in Cincinnati, Ohio. He offered to have an elemental analysis done on samples of the dress by the chemistry department at the University of Cincinnati. Just to note here, the university was not informed about the history or significance of the dress. The results were startling. Regarding the elemental analysis of the powder, the letter from university stated that the X-ray fluorescence test revealed sulfur, sodium, possible trace evidence of chlorides, and silicon. The spectroscopic emission test discovered large amounts of sodium, aluminium, iron, and magnesium, along with small amounts of manganese, calcium, and silicon. Mr. Stringfield said, quote, "The powder substance is strange in relation to its inorganic elemental content. It appears to be high in undetermined organic hydrocarbons." End quote.
He also wrote the following in his report. Several methods which normally bleach or discolor clothes dyes were tried in an attempt to duplicate the color change observed on the dress. These were A. Chlorine bleach, both wet and dry. B. Acid treatment. C. Base treatment. D. Ultraviolet light, 1-day exposure. And E. Sun lamp, 1-day exposure. None of these produced any effect similar to the color change observed. The closest was acid treatment, which bleached it white but not red. This is interesting, even though it was not a negative result. It shows that whatever the reaction was, it was not the usual discoloration reactions that I know. It's too bad that the white, actually pink, powder was not saved because it had to fall into certain chemical classifications and we probably could have found out what it was. Biochemists also conducted DNA analysis on fabric samples of the dress, concluding that DNA deposits came from Betty, a second from a human male of probable African extract, and third was alpha proteobacterium, which is a type of bacteria found in soils and water, but no evidence of otherworldly DNA was found. According to the scientific analyses on the pink stains of Betty's dress, it seems as though an anomalous biological substance had permanently altered the physical characteristics of the fabric. Barney, sadly, passed away in 1969. A life of cigarette smoking, poor diet, and stress had taken its toll on his health, and he died of a cerebral hemorrhage.
Betty lived until the age of 85, before passing away from lung cancer in 2004. Though the two may be gone from this world forever, their story lives on as arguably the most famous case of alien abduction in history.
Alright, man, are you ready to recklessly theorize about what we believe is the truth in the matter?
I guess so, man. It's a fascinating and it's a really complicated topic to talk about because there are so many little intricacies and details in this case, and yeah, but let's try to figure it out together, you know.
So I've had about 25 years to think about this case, and I've had a lot longer to think about it than you. So I would like to know, just based on the information we went over tonight, what do you think is the most likely scenario that happened to them?
You know what I think it is? I mean, I had an idea and I'm probably gonna proceed like telling it and stuff, but a little bit I changed the way I feel about the situation. Then you played the recording of the hypnosis session of the Barney, right?
Yeah, Barney.
It was intense, like the real emotions and stuff. He was really scared. So yeah, it made me think about it.
Well, you changed your opinion from what?
No, I haven't changed it, but I mean, it made me like question it.
Okay.
Because of how real the feelings were and how
So you think that's-
traumatic was his experience. I mean,
Right.
judging from the emotions.
So you think that something happened, but you don't know what it is.
My opinion that probably it was false memory.
False memory.
Really strong one. Really strong one. Why? I have a couple of reasons, and even I have more proof to this theory after we finished our talk. Like the thing about the false memories is that people can be how do you say that? Can be subject to those memories depending like on many factors like stress and whatnot. But the most important thing about it is that I think for them, because after they went, they kept being, reinforced in some ways in their belief that it was an alien abduction. First of all, by the close relative of the.
Oh yeah, because Betty's sister claimed to have seen a UFO in the 1950s.
Yes, so her memory, whether was it false or not, but
right,
it was reinforced by the experience of her close relative who she confined in.
Right,
and then after that, she read a book on the UFOs, right?
Right,
and it also probably brought about more evidence for her belief in that memory, and that. The thing about the book that I read about the couple of studies when they went through the, in a way, similar process with the kids and with the adults too, I think. They asked them, like, do you... Before the experiment, they divided them like in several groups, and they would ask them some questions about plausibility of some events, maybe like 40 events, and some of them were like some weird events like possessions, alien abduction, or something along those lines, And before the study, they would ask them. And during the study, in some of the groups, they would give them the stories to read about alien abduction or possessions or some things like that, which are not plausible. And then after they read the story, they would ask them again, and many people would rate the possibility of those experiences higher,
just from reading it,
just because they read the stories. And it's kind of crazy how it's probably like a subconscious system or something.
So okay, sorry to interrupt you, but so you're kind of leaning more towards suggestion, like maybe as her relative suggested that it might have been a true story,
and then read a book.
And then she read a book about the phenomenon, and then she's kind of subconsciously told herself that, maybe this really happened this way, and maybe she made up this fantasy kind of, and then started to believe it. Is that kind of where you're going with it?
Yeah. And also in our podcast we mentioned there was another like army officer or something who also was
the Air Force officer.
Yeah, who was also like into this hypothesis.
Wait, what are you talking? Are you talking about the episode 5 we did?
No. Here in this episode.
Which guy are you talking about? The guy who wrote that book that she checked out of the library? Because the book. Okay, so Betty checked out a book called I think it was called The Flying Saucer Phenomenon. Don't quote me on that. It was something similar to that, but it was written by Major Donald Kehoe, who was a Marine Corps aviator in, I think, the 1920s or 30s. Is that who you're referring to? And then there was also an Air Force officer that Betty was talking to about her experience.
I'm talking about Air Force officer.
Okay, Major Henderson, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, you're talking about him.
And if I remember correctly, I think he didn't question her like, he didn't say like, what the hell is going on?
Well, he took her report seriously.
Yeah, he took it seriously.
Yeah.
So,
but it's his job to take it seriously, like, because the Air Force at that time took that kind of shit very seriously, because they didn't know what these were, if these were real things that people were seeing in the sky, or if they were, like some secret Soviet aircraft or something. They're going to take it seriously.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not judging on anything, but I'm just saying that it probably even further reinforced her belief in that it was actually what happened, that it was like alien abduction, because
That's a good point.
even the army thought like, oh, they took it seriously, so she probably was like, oh shit, maybe it happened for real. So those points, I had some other points about that. Oh, the other points were also about the hypnosis, and just like the doctor said, I think we like quoted him or something in this podcast, that he said it's usually still really subjective.
Oh yeah. So
experience,
it's the truth as the subjects perceive it.
Yeah, it's the truth as a
not necessarily the actual truth, but it's the truth as the people who are being hypnotized perceive the truth to be.
Yeah.
So it's so it's the truth as they perceive it.
So probably I would imagine, like with the hypnosis, it would like relax you and make your imagination kind of go wild and stuff, because when you're relaxed, you don't have this, borders in your mind. You're more open to whatever comes to your head.
Well, can I ask you a difficult question then, if that's what you believe? Is how would you explain Betty and Barney's stories kind of syncing together when they're being interviewed by the psychiatrist separately?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's
right.
That's a really good question. They were interviewed separately, right?
Yeah.
Did they talk? The question would be.
So I think in your scenario, let's say that you're on the right track here.
Yeah.
We would have to solve that issue, how they were able to come to the same, like have their story straight together, and what synced up together, Betty and Barney having told the same story on record in separate rooms, separately from each other.
Yeah,
how would that be explained? I guess they would have to talk about what happened with each other before going to the psychiatrist.
Here I would have I think I would ask you if it's do you know if it's the first ever recorded encounter with the UFOs or no?
Well, not UFOs, but it's the first recorded experience, the first recorded report of alien abduction in the United States is this case.
First recorded report.
Yeah, the first reported, I should say.
Reported. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay. So probably there were some experiences before that, right?
Maybe. Yeah, we just don't know. It's just the first one that ever got recorded.
Even her, what was her sister?
Her sister saw a UFO, apparently, like, allegedly.
Yeah.
But didn't get taken aboard or anything.
I mean, really big question here would be, first of all, whether or not her husband read the same book.
Are you talking about Barney?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know.
That's a good question.
But my impression was that Barney was way less thrilled about the topic and the experience that they went through than Betty was. Betty seemed to be more excited and wanted to know more information about what they had been through. And Barney was kind of the opposite. He wanted to forget about it. As the story goes, I should say, is that he wanted to forget about it and not tell anybody and just kind of, let it be. But Betty was the one who wanted to really dig into it. So I doubt that he read the book. I think it was just Betty.
But she might have told him about the book and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
She might have asked him like, stuff like that, like, Barney, I read that, I read this. So probably he was, I don't know if it's the right word, but kind of primed or something to see some similar patterns,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And if the I would call it a myth. I read an article, then they call it like alien abductions are some sort of modern myth, some sort of kind of mystical experience. And it has some common patterns, like being abducted, being talked by the alien leader and stuff like that. But the big question remains is whether or not the pattern was really established before them. That I don't know this.
Before what?
Before they were abducted, because you said they are the first reported case.
And I would argue that this case is what established the pattern of alien abduction, because it seems like nearly all of the cases that happened after this one seem to follow similar patterns. Like there's it doesn't happen exactly this way, but I noticed that in other alien abduction experiences that people report is very similar to this. There's a lot of parallels, which is interesting. I mean, whether or not you believe the story or not, but
yeah, that's why I think it's a big question whether or not the pattern was established by them, or it was just like, you know, kind of made more prominent by them.
Right.
I think that's the really important question here. And if it's yeah, I think probably, in my opinion, that might have been a false memory, especially taking into account all the how the details emerge as the course of them being more like the wife being more interested in all the alien stuff.
Right.
The more and more details came up. I mean, it might be a coincidence, but
you don't think
I
so?
don't think so.
Okay, so if you think it's a false memory, I guess I would have to challenge you. What do you make of the star map that Betty drew? Because the match was found after the astronomical data was completed years later. Do you make anything of that, or do you think that she got lucky?
I mean, the scientist from the second video, he had his point. He said like the probability is like really low. He said
it was like 1 in several thousand.
1 in several thousand.
But that's Stanton Friedman, and I want to put an asterisk next to him because he is a really smart guy. He's a nuclear physicist, but he sort of became this UFO guy. I don't know if you know who he is, but he was on nearly every UFO related History Channel show. He'd be one of the talking heads that would pop up, and he would always be like in the pro UFO being real corner. You know, he'd always be that guy on TV to argue for the existence of UFOs and alien abduction and all that sort of thing. So yeah, he would have a sort of a bias, I would believe.
Yeah. And then you listen to the second video, right? Or was it the third clip, I think?
With Carl Sagan.
With Carl
right?
Sagan. Then he mentioned that it's all about perspective.
Right. So our listeners didn't get to see the video, but as he was explaining this, he had a notepad. It was kind of like a flip book, and with like a clear cover on it, which had the lines connecting the stars, and he would flip the cover with the lines. Like it was a clear plastic cover that had the lines connecting the stars drawn on it. So he could flip the cover off and just show you what the stars looked like without the lines. And he was arguing that basically there's no resemblance if you take away the lines. It's just people connecting lines to dots to make whatever they want to see.
People finding the patterns that they want to see. And
Right.
I think it's a good argument against the first scientist, because the first one,
but I do want to bring up that so the star map in the pattern that Marjorie Fish found, all the stars that were connected by the lines were represented a certain type of star that was 5% of the stars in our galactic neighborhood. So only the stars that were connected by the lines were this one specific type of star. It wasn't just any star connecting each other. Do you know what I mean? Like they were allegedly the right type of stars to support planets that would support life. You know, like our sun. And our sun was actually part of the pattern. So if you go back and you look at the star map, one of the stars on the map that's connected with the lines is our sun. And then those two big stars in the center were allegedly Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 reticuli. So it's a really weird case. It's either real or she got very lucky.
But don't you think that what was the name of that lady looking for the star patterns?
Oh, Marjorie Fish.
Marjorie Fish was looking for a specific pattern with specific stars.
Right,
as
and
well.
I do see what Carl Sagan is saying, where you can pick and choose whatever angle you're looking at this map. You know what I mean? Like you can rotate yourself around in space to find,
yeah.
you know, any pattern that you're looking for, basically.
And then you can also find the stars you're looking to.
Yeah, I would love to hear more astronomers' opinions on this star map, because I'm kind of out of my element here. I would really like to know if the star map is worth even discussing, or if it really is like seeing Abraham Lincoln in a cloud. You know what I mean? Just seeing shit that you want to see.
It's definitely not my field too, but also I'm more kind of inclined towards the argument by Carl Sagan, because
Yeah, and it's fair.
It's
Yeah.
it sounds really reasonable.
I actually am too, and I guess that brings me to what I want to talk about when it comes to what I think. I've had so many years to think about this case, and when I was a kid, I was the kid who wanted to go to the bookstore so that I could buy books on UFOs and alien abductions, Like some little kids were really into like dinosaurs and shit like that, but I was into space and UFOs and aliens and all that shit. I just love the whole topic, and it really captured my imagination when I was a kid. I've had a lot of time to think about this. When I was a kid, I believed the story to be true because the star map angle was heavily shilled as being like, there's no way she could have made this map had she not known what she was drawing, basically. But I guess I'll start by talking about Barney. I'm not really sure what to make of Barney. He seems very genuine, and he seemed like a really good guy. And to me, I think it's clear that Barney really loved Betty. But as for Betty, I don't trust her. Man, I'm trying to put this into words. So, like, some of the more wild claims, they were made like after Barney had passed away. Like, did you remember the part in the story with the leaves on the table, where she found the earrings amongst the leaves that were just magically appeared on their kitchen table?
Yeah.
That was only reported after Barney had died.
Yeah, it's an important detail, man.
It is. Yeah. So she only told that story after Barney had passed away, which is kind of like, well, Barney's not here to tell his side of the story.
Yeah.
Also, I'm gonna post this interview with Betty in 1999, but there's this really long interview with her as an 80-year-old woman, and she's talking about her experience, and there are some discrepancies between her story as told in 1999 versus the 60s. So one detail was that she tore her, like in the 1960s when she reported this, that she tore her dress when the leader was trying to unzip the back of her dress, and the leader kept tugging at it and ripped her dress. That was her story in the 60s. But as she's telling the story again in this interview in 1999, she says that as they were leading them into the flying saucer, she tried to fight back and tore her dress, and she was like trying to punch the beings, like, fighting against them, and that's how she tore the dress. So two different stories on how she tore her dress, which is not a good sign. And then the same interview, the Frederick Valentich case came up in that interview again, just kind of randomly, and she said that she went to Australia to meet his parents, and she told the story of, man, I don't want to rehash the case, but if you go back and listen to episode 5, you'll know how I feel about that case. I highly recommend you go listen to episode 5 if you haven't already. But she basically says that she went to Australia to meet his parents, and they went down to the beach together, and they were like screaming into the ocean to bring him back, like screaming into the ocean. And she was talking about how like the UFOs would come in closer as if like trying to listen to what they're saying and shit. And to me, it's like, man, Betty, your story would be far more believable to me if you didn't oversell it. Like if you just left it where it was in the 60s, I would have been more inclined to believe the story. But what she did was she kind of went on all these TV shows. She did all these interviews. She really seemed to love the public spotlight. She was bragging about going on international television in all these different countries, and telling her story and just being kind of like a celebrity. And I think that was probably her motivation.
So you would argue that belief and it was kind of given some sort of meaning to her life.
Well, yeah, I think that's possible. I can't say for certain whether or not she really believed that she had this experience or if it was all completely made up. But I think that it started out as being made up. I think that she made this up. And I think that it's possible that Barney went along with it because he really loved Betty. And I think that he probably wasn't as keen to do this as Betty was. And I think that could have been part of the reason why his health started failing and he had all this stress and his blood pressure was going up because they were gaining notoriety for. All right, so just imagine that you and your wife collaborate with each other to construct this elaborate hoax story for attention or whatever. And then you get this attention and you start getting more attention than you thought that you would ever get. And it's all built on a lie. And I think that could have added to his stress levels, his high blood pressure, and all of these he had an ulcer. He started getting all of this anxiety and stress and high blood pressure. And I think that this fucking story probably did not help him in any way. And I think that he was less keen on the story than she was. But I think that he put up with it because he loved her. And that's kind of my theory, man. Like I as for the star map to me, it's kind of like, when you buy a new piece of IKEA furniture and you put it all together, but there's still like some parts laying around on the ground. You're like, where does this go? Where does this fit in? I don't know. It's just like the leftover parts from an piece of IKEA furniture. You don't know where it goes, but you already built the furniture and it's good to go. Like you already have the complete picture pretty much, but you just don't know where to fit it. So when it comes to the star map, I kind of compare it to the extra screws to like a piece of IKEA furniture. You don't know where it goes, where it's supposed to go. I think in the case of the star map, I think she got lucky. I think she kind of got lucky that there was a reasonable pattern that could be connected together. That would be my guess. But when it comes to the alien beings that she described, so I want to just point out some stuff about it that it doesn't make sense to me. So for one, the most glaring question that I have is why the aliens look so human-like. Like they were described as having 2 eyes, a mouth, a nose, 2 legs, 2 arms, 5 fingers, feet. They were wearing clothes and uniforms, and probably most important of all, the alien that she described as a leader was speaking English to her. Not telepathically, not through like some translation machine or anything like that, but just speaking English vocally. So I would want to know how an alien civilization from 40 light years away would know how to speak English using a voice box in their body. But our humans' closest relatives, chimps and gorillas, can't speak the way we do. We're very unique as humans in the way that we can use our voice to talk to each other. Like our closest genetic relatives, chimps, bonobos, gorillas, they can't do that. But an alien civilization from 40 light years away can come, breathe our air, and speak our language, but they somehow don't know they don't know about our spinal column. They don't know about all of these, they don't know about aging. They don't have a concept for aging. They don't know that some people lose their teeth as they get older. They didn't know what dentures were. They didn't know why Betty's teeth couldn't be removed, but Barney's could. But they know how to speak English. It makes no fucking sense to me. So I think that she made this story up. I give her far less credit than you do. I think that you're more on this the side that she probably, you think is a false memory, but I think that this was a hoax from the get-go. I think it was a hoax.
And on the false memory thing, if you say that it was a hoax by, I always forget what was her name, the wife,
Betty.
But some more points for the false memory hypothesis, like for the Barney, because Barney he used to he worked in Boston or something. It was far away from home, right?
So about Barney, he used to work in Philadelphia, and then they got married, and then he had to transfer somewhere closer to where Betty lived, which was Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is like north of Boston. I believe it's north of Boston, right? And then Barney started working in Boston instead, but he still had to commute a really long way, which was like 80 minutes one way to from work. So 160 minutes total to and from work.
So I would imagine that he would need to wake up pretty early, right?
Yeah.
So that brings me to another point. When they went on the vacation, they did they go back the same day because of the hurricane?
Yeah,
warning?
so the story goes that they got to Montreal and they couldn't find a motel that would accept their dog.
Yeah.
And then as they were driving around looking for a motel, there was a radio broadcast that came on talking about a tropical storm that was coming up the side of the east coast of the US with, I think they said it was 130 mile per hour winds. And as the story goes, they're like, oh shit, we better get back home before the storm hits. So, and then as they were driving back that night, that's when the incident happened. Yeah.
And so they probably didn't sleep at night. Why I'm bringing this up?
Well, of course they didn't sleep because it was at like 3 a.m. when this 2 a.m. or something like that when this all happened. So.
And the morning before he had to wake up early.
No, because he took the weekend off.
The whole weekend off.
Yeah.
The whole weekend
yeah. So they were neither of them had work the next day.
Oh, but the day before.
Well, no,
we don't know.
No, they didn't work. They left on, I think it was on a Friday, and then that Friday night was when they went to Montreal, but then they drove back or something.
But he worked on Friday, or we don't know.
No, he took, like, if you go back and you read the information that we gathered, he had the next few days off.
Yeah. I know. But that day.
No, he didn't work that day.
Because I was thinking to say that if he had to wake up really early that day to drive to work and then go back, right? Go back home and then drive.
I guess we don't know what time he woke up the day of the incident. So he could have been sleep deprived. I mean, I'm sure they were at least partially sleep deprived.
Yeah, why I'm bringing up the sleep deprivation, because in some other article I read that pretty frequently there is a pattern of the interrupted REM sleep.
REM?
Yeah, or some sleep paralysis or stuff like that. And then before I heard that if you're sleep deprived, and if you're sleep deprived for long enough, that actually happened to me. I think once you start like seeing some shit, you know.
Are you talking about what we talked about in the Shadow People episode?
Yeah, the same stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that if you're sleep deprived, you might see some stuff. But the question remains, what actually happened?
Yeah, I don't think that a sleep deprivation can explain this entire fucking incident.
It definitely,
because that is
it's
not seeing something out of the corner of your eye. This is seeing an alien spaceship following you in your car, and like the only thing that I can think of that could explain this incident that's not a hoax or some sort of false memory would be like if that diner that they ate at spiked their food with LSD or something, and they just tripped balls on their way home. But I kind of doubt it.
Yeah, probably not, right?
Probably not. No.
I'm just saying that it doesn't. If we follow the false memory hypothesis, it doesn't need to explain the entire thing. It just needs to be like a trigger, you know, and then it kind of builds up on it. Because I really got the impression that the Barney during the hypnosis hypnosis session, he was. I don't think he was like faking or something.
Oh, so I do want to bring this up. So I kind of had the same initial impression as you as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you know something kind of weird that I noticed on Barney's hypnosis tapes? You know, he's like basically hysterical, crying. Would you agree that he's basically like crying?
Yeah, he was kind of crying, yeah.
But I didn't hear one sniffle. That would be a kind of a normal like a physical response to crying would be your nose getting congested.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't hear one sniffle on his hypnosis tape. And it could be just because it's a poor quality and I didn't notice the sniffles, but I distinctly listened to it. I think I listened to it twice and I was trying to find a moment where he was sniffling. Just even one, just quick, nothing. I could hear his hysterical voice. He wasn't really breathing through his nose. I could tell he was just talking out of his mouth and breathing out of his mouth, but I didn't hear one sniffle, which really, it made my ears perk up. And I was really trying to be like, well, if he's crying and he's hysterical, why is he not sniffling? Why are there no sniffles?
So you think he might be?
I think it was all theater, man. If I had to guess, I think it's theater. And it sucks, man. Because I really think that even, man, I always had the impression that Barney was kind of a legit guy, and I didn't think that he would be the type of guy to, you know, lie about something like this. But I almost feel like that part of his personality is true. He probably was a legit kind of guy, but I think sometimes when you love somebody that much, they can try to get you to go along with their crazy schemes, you know? And I think that might have been the case here.
You know, what made me think about it, like theater, it's a legit hypothesis, but the story you told just like a couple of minutes ago about Betty going to Australia and you know, kind of talking to the ocean or something, trying to connect with the aliens or something, like bring him back. It somehow reminded me of the old Greek poems or whatnot, like myths. Then they would talk with the Poseidon or something. That kind of behavioral pattern, you know, for them. Like when we look at it from our perspective, it's like probably we would think like, oh, it's a theater, but they believed in it.
I'm just saying, I don't think that Barney, man, it's kind of hard for me to say this. I mean, just the fact that I didn't hear any sniffling when he's on this tape crying.
Maybe it wasn't just caught on the recording for some reasons.
But it was still a really long recording, man. It was
no. I mean, maybe the frequency of the was kind of
maybe, man, but
too much for the recorder.
I
don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe maybe
I know what you're saying, but I don't know. I think it would have picked it up, but yeah. And I think Betty kind of had this. I think her motivation was kind of narcissistic in a way, where she felt almost like a guru, almost like a prophet, because she got to meet the aliens. Like they chose her. She was the chosen one. And she became this kind of icon in this small sector of the world that believes in UFOs. And to some people, you know, certain things like UFOs and alien abductions and stuff like this, it becomes sort of like a religion to people. And Betty became a prophet of that religion. And I think that's what drew her in.
Being a prophet of that.
Yeah. And just it almost disgusted me when she said that she went to Australia and started screaming at the ocean with his parents. It's to bring, and she's saying, oh, you know, you could see the UFOs. They would come in close to try to listen to what we were saying. And It's like
No, but I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
But again, it's like it's more like yeah, if you look at it from the modern perspective, yeah, it's kind of,
Yeah.
what the hell. And if you look at it from the perspective that she's just making it up, and it's a legit perspective to and a legit point of view. But if you look at it from the perspective that she is just like, she's in this mythical belief system and she lives in it, like for example, Greeks did. Then they would talk to Poseidon or Zeus or whatnot. They kind of believed in that.
Right. So you're saying that it's not bullshit if she believed it. Kind of like it's not a lie if that's what she really believed.
I'm not saying exactly that. It's,
but like I said,
it might be. I mean, it's still objectively, right?
Yeah.
It would be like a lie, but
Right.
subjectively, it's a kind of a different experience if you look at it from her point of view, which we cannot get like in her head and stuff. But I imagine that this kind of pattern of thinking is possible. I mean, that you get into it and then you're not, for some like unconscious reasons or whatnot, you cannot just, like for the Greeks, if you probably would ask them, hey, stop believing in Zeus and Poseidon. It's all, it's not here. It's just freaking water, man.
Right, but
they would go like, water, what the hell? You know what happened?
But the whole story started with Betty. Before Betty, there was no lore of aliens flying out of the ocean. I mean, at least to what that I'm aware of. Do you know what I mean? Like this all started with her. You can argue that the Greek traditions and the stories were passed on through countless generations, and that's how the myth came to be. But this all started with her, and I think that's the difference here.
No, but I guess all the like the. Are we sure about that?
Well, I'm just saying that this is the first reported case of an alien abduction in the U.S.
Yeah.
So,
but also her sister said that
she saw a UFO, but she didn't claim that they abducted her.
But there were probably, I guess we gotta I got our listeners or someone gotta look into it of the story. There might have been some like encounters or whatnot before.
Yeah, but there even none that are as none public like this, at least. I mean,
I don't mean the real encounters.
There is a legend. There are legends surrounding.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
But there's nothing confirmed like this. Like for example, there's a can't remember what 18-something in Texas that an alleged UFO crashed in Texas in like the 1800s. But it's never been confirmed. It's just like it was reported in newspapers and nobody knows if it was actually true or not.
Yeah, that's what I meant. There was some lore to it, right?
Yeah, but nothing like she took it to a whole new level is what I mean. But I think we're beating. I mean, we're just spinning our tires here, going over the same stuff. So, yeah, I just think when I was listening to her talk about going to Australia to, meet with Frederick Valentich's parents and going down to the shoreline together and just screaming at the ocean to give him back or bring him back or whatever it was, and I just wanted to face palm. And it was just like, it's kind of like that Simpsons meme where it shows the newspaper clipping where it says old man yells at cloud, except it's old lady yells at ocean. And it's just, and I think that Betty's story would have been slightly more believable if she didn't oversell it, by going on every possible TV show that she could and every interview and occasionally not keeping her story consistent. And I find myself not able to believe her anymore. So that's kind of where I stand. And it's not to say that I don't believe in UFOs. I mean, I do believe that UFOs exist, and there's some weird shit flying around in the sky. And I don't know what the fuck they are. They could be alien in origin, but it seems like, I think if aliens were to visit Earth, I don't think that they would bring themselves with it. I think they would send some sort of probe and something maybe AI powered. I'm sure if they can send probes here, they've already figured out how to make AI and all that. So that's kind of where I stand, man. I think that her story is kind of dumb too, because it's sort of like a snapshot of what people thought aliens would be like in the 1950s and 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like the image of aliens that people had back then is far different than now. And it's sort of like you look back on it, they're, you know, the aliens are very human like. It's almost like they're space people. Whereas it's kind of weird if you think about it, how an alien civilization could evolve completely separately on another planet 40 light years away to look very, very similar to us. I mean, 2 legs, 2 arms, 5 fingers, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, a round head, you know, ear holes, a torso. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
not even our closest relatives here on Earth have like are like that, except, I mean, they can't talk, they can't speak English. These aliens could. You know what I mean? I don't believe Betty. I wish I so want to believe it, but I can't, man. This would be such a cool story if it were true. But at the end of the day, I don't believe her. And I think she made it up. And I think that Barney went along with it. And I think that he reluctantly went along with it. And I think that that's why his health was declining so quickly. And he had all these stress related health problems like the ulcer and the high blood pressure. I mean, sure, cigarette smoking probably was part of that as well, but I don't think that the stress from all the notoriety around their hoax helped him at all. And I think that that probably shortened his lifespan, which sucks. It fucking sucks. And I think that Barney was probably a good guy who got caught up in the antics of a crazy woman that he loved. And I think that's my guess. So what do you think, man?
Yeah, man, you made a lot of good points, and now it's like, it's really hard to say for sure, and we cannot get into her brain. But I still believe that her patterns of her behavior is kind of, you know, religious in a way, and I still think that it's probably a false memory, because yeah, I guess I don't know too much about her character or whatnot, you know. So from what I know, because I didn't study this case as extensively, you know, I just read a bit about it, and then read about like false memories and in alien encounters and abductions and stuff like that. So I'll say probably a false memory.
It's fair enough, man. Neither of us, or nor does anybody else, have like a full, complete picture or understanding of what happened here. Everyone's working with incomplete information, and we've got to piece together what we can, and hopefully we move the needle just slightly in the direction of the truth in this matter. I spent a lot of time on this one. It's why I planned on doing this one at least a month ago, but it took me a lot longer to get it all ready. So, yeah, man. Do you have anything else you want to add to this discussion?
I think that in a way that it might sound crazy again, in some weird way, like it always does, you know.
Yeah.
Then I add something to the discussion and shit. But in a way, there might be something to both of our points. That it might be that, yep, they're kind of both valid in a way, you know.
Yeah, you can even make the argument that maybe the experience was completely real, and all of these things, you can do mental gymnastics to justify any hole in the story. Like, for example, you can say, well, maybe the aliens learned English by monitoring the radio waves of Earth. You know, maybe they learned English that way. Or, you know, maybe they weren't aliens at all. Maybe they came from somewhere else. Maybe people from the future. Or maybe you can say that they weren't life forms at all. Maybe they were some sort of like robot that were constructed to look human-like so that they wouldn't freak the abductees out. So there are a lot of mental gymnastics you can make.
Yeah, it's like for her case, for example, if she for real like had false memories,
yeah,
but they were like reinforced from all around her. Everyone was like giving her attention and stuff, you know, like
oh
you
yeah,
said,
and
like
I think she was feeding off of that attention.
Yeah. So for her, I would say to look into it and to doubt it in a way would like jeopardize her position. Maybe she wasn't like, you know, maybe she wasn't like conscious of it or something, but I guess then you get that kind of rush, like you said, then everyone is like paying attention to you.
I think she was feeding off of it and she was loving it. And then Barney had the opposite reaction. And I think he was conflicted about what was happening, but I think that he had already gone along with the lie kind of, and that he felt kind of trapped in a position he didn't want to be in, which was to keep going along with this bullshit story. And I think that he was probably an honest man of integrity, and this kind of ate away at him and his morality. And yeah, I that's what I think. I know we've gone on pretty long in this one, but
yeah.
But I would encourage anyone out there to listen to the optional Betty Hill interview from 1999 that I will publish along with this episode. And also the hypnosis tapes. I'm going to publish those as well as optional listens, both Betty and Barney. So if you want to take a listen to those, go listen to those. I just want to give a quick warning though, the audio quality is really bad. It was recorded on a 1960s potato basically, so
man, I wanna say something more, just a little bit more.
Okay.
Because this is kind of a interesting topic, I think. So what I was saying about like that it's possible for both of our hypotheses to be true in the same time in some weird way. Like imagine if you like some weird example. If you saw, I don't know, if you saw some magic event or something, and it was like a false memory, but like unconsciously or whatnot, you believed in that memory because it was like in your mind and shit, and then everyone is starting like saying, oh, like he or she saw magic and he saw magic, so you feel like really, you know, reinforced again. And then probably you won't be so keen on trying to challenge that idea. So I think it might be something like that.
It almost makes me feel like a hypocrite in a way, where I'm poking all these holes in her story. But I mean, I had my own experience with, you know, some paranormal shit, and I still stand by it. Yeah, man, it's just like, it almost makes me feel bad, but there's just too many things about this case that make me just not want to believe her. And I think that she did it for attention, or I don't know why she did it, but she did it. You know, people don't have to have logical reasons to just make shit up like this.
No, I mean, attention feels nice.
Yeah, that could have been the enough reason for
attention
her.
Feels nice. And if it's, you know, because of that false memory, it might not be like a conscious thing that's going on in her head, but that might have been the force that was kind of reinforcing that false memory too in her. Maybe she wasn't conscious of it, maybe she was, I don't know that, but it's freaking interesting case, man.
Yeah. Well, anything else you want to go over?
No, I think it's good enough, man. For now, maybe we'll go back to this case later or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man. Do you have any apologies, clarifications, or shout outs to make?
Yeah. Shout outs to the monkey who scratched me, you know. I had to freaking go through.
The monkey or the monkey man?
That's a good question, man. It remains. I'm not sure. There were too many of them, you know. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'd like to apologize to the aliens that took Betty and Barney Hill on board their spaceship, just in case that I'm wrong and that all of this actually happened. I didn't mean to call you fake, and I, for one, welcome our Zeta Reticulant overlords. All right, man. I think it's time to get out of here. Like sands through the hourglass, so too are the minutes of our podcast. But don't fret, dear listener. We'll be back again to breathe new life into an old mystery next time.
Помните, ребята, истина прячется в тени. Вместе мы найдем ее.
This is Super Mystery Bros.
Guess who's back? Ivan's back. Back again.